Something funny I find about NFL free agency is the weeks and months leading up to it is we're so focused on the free agents out there that we have our blinders on and we never think about what about guys who are likely going to get cut and then become free agents. So that's what the purpose of today's video is. There's 3 to 5 guys out there that I could see getting released. Some of them are starters that the Broncos could have some interest in. Now, before we look at any of those players, I want to see if we can get to 500 likes on today's video. The last free agency video we posted got close to it, 424. So if you enjoy the free content, scroll on down, click that thumbs up button today and every time you tune in. Now, the first player we're going to talk about is not a starter, at least not anymore. At one point he was, and that's the Panthers running back Miles Sanders. Had a breakout season with the Eagles, rushed behind that offensive line, put up 1,000 yards. He gets paid in Carolina, and he quickly falls to the bottom of the depth chart, and shame on me for thinking he might be good in fantasy in 2023. But no one cares about your fantasy team. This past season for Carolina, minimal role. I mean, 55 carries. This pretty much tells you everything there is to know. He got paid from that 2022 season with the Eagles, 11 touchdowns, 1,200 yards, and just a bad investment by Carolina. It has not worked out well, and you can see what the numbers look like from a rushing standpoint on the left and a receiving standpoint on the right. Chuba Hubbard is the clear number 1 back in Carolina as well. He got a contract extension recently, plus Jonathan Brooks, who was a second-round pick for them last year, but he did unfortunately get re-injured again. He's still in the mix, so I think the Carolina Panthers are feeling pretty good at running back to move on from a bust of a signing and get some level of cap savings, but it's probably not even too much cap, motivated as much as it is. He's not a part of our future. He's not a part of our, present. So why are we holding on to a guy that we have no use for anymore? But the Broncos, they need a running back, so we should explore every running back option. Although Sanders, I don't think is a good one for Denver. Next up, it is Ravens tight end Mark Andrews. We talked about Mr. Andrews right after that big game he had against the Buffalo Bills. So there is a possibility that the Ravens move on from Andrews. He's got a $16 million cap hit coming up. However, the Ravens can save $11 million by moving on from him. And I don't think they're going to make their decision solely based on one playoff game and one specific moment on a specific 2-point conversion. But $11 million for a guy who at times last year looked like he was getting phased out for Isaiah Likely might be too big of savings to ignore. Plus, we all know why Denver could be interested in Andrews, right? I don't think I need to explain this one much further. Their tight end stunk last year. It was the worst tight end room in possibly NFL history. I think I should look this up. I don't know if a tight end room has ever put up fewer yards as a whole than the 2024 Broncos. So Mark Andrews, I could see being a cut candidate for the Ravens just based on not solely the Bills game, but also there were stretches last year where Isaiah Likely looked like he was the tight end 1. But then other moments, Andrews had 11 touchdowns. You don't stumble into 11 touchdowns, I guess, unless you're Jamal Williams in your last year in Detroit. So maybe they feel like that is a kind of, not one-hit wonder, of course, with Mark, but the last bit of good football juice out of him and take a page out of the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick handbook. It's best to move on from a player 1 year too early than 1 year too late. But if Andrews does end up getting released, I think this could be a good player for Bo Nix and the Broncos to pursue because he would immediately fill a void and a need at the tight end position. I don't think it gets in the way of you going after a tight end in the draft. It's not like Andrews at 29 years old is going to be a piece of your future for the long term, but he could help solve problems in the red zone where it's not like Denver was a bad red zone offense, but there's always room to improve, and I think that could be a good spot for Andrews to fill in and help out the second-year quarterback. So no on Sanders, in on Andrews. Third up is Jalen Thompson. Not a household name, but he's a quality starting safety for the Arizona Cardinals. Pro Football Focus ranked him 32nd out of 98 qualifying safeties last year. So he is a good football player that sure may not be someone that everyone's heard of before, but that doesn't mean he doesn't make good plays and isn't a valuable contributor on defense. Plus, just off the cuff here, I'm pretty sure you overlap with Vance Joseph. And, well, Zach Allen followed Vance Joseph to Denver, so what's one more Cardinal defender? If they move on from Jalen Thompson, post June 1, it saves the Cardinals $6.6 million. So this could be one of those 2 post June 1 designations for Arizona. The Arizona Cardinals at defense, I think, are looking to not like rebuild, because that would imply that they had a house to begin with, but I think they want to continue to go younger and maybe allocate money elsewhere. So Thompson has been a long-rumored cut candidate for Arizona. And Denver safety room, I think, is going to be a spot where the Broncos try and really improve it. Because while Brandon Jones, I thought, played pretty well last year, I think he was a quintessential, you get what you pay for. You didn't pay for a top 5 safety. You didn't get a top 5 safety. But you did pay for an average safety, and you got an average safety who probably played a little bit above average for good stretches of last season. However, PJ Locke and the depth after that, big thumbs down for me. So that's got to be a spot where the Broncos really address, whether it's in free agency or the draft. I think depth is a big need for the safety room. Now, up next on the show, I want to run through some more free agent targets that could be eventual free agents if they end up being released. But first things first, I do want to give a shout out to our friends over at Fanatics. If you want to get some more Broncos gear in your closet as the summer months are not too far away, get this Bo Nix jersey. It's a t-shirt jersey. I love a good jersey because it doesn't cost as much as a jersey does, but you still get the same effect of getting your favorite player on the back and your team on the front. I put a link for this, chatsports.com/Knicks shirt, in the comments and description of today's video. So if you want to get some more Broncos gear in your life while supporting the channel, use chatsports.com/Knicks shirt. Moving on from Jalen Thompson, fourth guy up is Darius Slay. I'm just saying right now, you're not signing Darius Slay to be a starting cornerback for this team. I am comfortable with Riley Moss at CB2. Jaquan McMillan's a great nickel, and Slay at his age is not a nickel anymore. But I do think Darius Slay could bring some great depth, some clear, awesome postseason experience, and maybe like Patrick Peterson a little bit, where remember Peterson was this incredible corner for the Cardinals for a long time. Nowadays, he kind of plays a little bit of a hybrid of like corner safety. So you bring Slay over for a little bit of experience. I still think he has some good football juice left in the tank. You can check out his numbers in 2024 and his PFF grades and things like that. And I'm not advocating for this guy to be a starting corner, but what I am advocating for is he'd be a better backup than Damari Mathis. And I think he'd be an influential member of the locker room. And if you're in a pinch and you lose a safety, Slay could probably fill in at that spot, just given his experience of roaming around the secondary. So I really value the depth from Slay and the leadership and the playoff and the postseason experience he could bring to this very young roster that, for the most part, only has one playoff appearance under their belt, where we all know Slay has a lot of postseason, experience under his belt. So this is a depth move, not a starting move at this point. And who knows if Darius Slay even wants to continue to play for a different team as a backup. He may just decide, I'm just going to go out on top, and that wouldn't be too surprising. But if he still is like, yeah, I can still play ball, and while the Eagles may not think that anymore and they don't want to pay me, if some other team does, I'll take more paychecks. So let's move west and let's go to Denver. After Slay, the fifth and final cut candidate to watch for is Christian Kirk, the Jags wide receiver. Remember when the Jags signed him to that big contract and everyone's like, what are the Jags doing? Turns out everyone was right, because it just hasn't really worked out in Jacksonville for Kirk. Mostly because of the injuries. I don't think he's been a complete bust. When he's on the field, he's had some really good production. But off the field, meaning not back up there. On the field, good, but the lack of on-the-field appearances is what's concerning. That's what I'm trying to spit out here. Only 379 yards last year in 8 games, and that was a season after missing some time the previous season before. So Kirk, who kind of broke out a little bit with the Cardinals and then was a bit of an overpay by the Jacksonville Jaguars. For the former second-round pick, he's only had 1,000-yard season in his career. That was his first year in Jacksonville when he played all 17 games. Since then, he's played 12 games in 2023, 8 games in 2024, and there is $10.4 million in cap savings to be had. Of the 5 guys we talked about today, Kirk is, I'd say, the most confident one I believe will be cut. I don't see a world where they bring him back after 2 seasons where he's missed considerable amount of time. And he hasn't been bad when he's on the field, but he also hasn't been so good where you're like, we'll take the good with the bad, even though he's been injured. When he's out there, he's terrific. And when he's out there, he's good. But he's not good enough for Jacksonville to stomach, a lack of $10.4 million in cap space and snaps to someone who just isn't really clicking and isn't staying productive and healthy, unfortunately. So I think Kirk with the Broncos receiver room, that could be a nice fit if Denver's looking for another cheap addition. We learned last year that Broncos, I don't think are going to spend huge at wide receiver this offseason. They brought in Josh Reynolds from Detroit for a pretty cheap contract, and I think Christian Kirk will probably line up for an affordable contract as well. So he could be this year's, what's his face from the Lions, Josh Reynolds type of signing for the Broncos. So going over the candidates one more time that Denver could have an eye on as soon as they are released. If I had to rank them, I'd probably go out of preference. Andrews 1, Slay 2, Thompson 3, Kirk 4, Sanders 5. Before we get on out of here, I want you guys to scroll on down and name a random Broncos tight end. I've got my guy in mind. I'm going to give you 3 more seconds to think of which random Broncos tight end you want to go with. 3, 2, 1. Daniel Graham. Broncos legend. Had some good years with Denver. 15 years ago now. Time flies. So Daniel Graham, let me know if you said the same guy down below in the comment section.